Alrighty, we are back. This is Garrison. I hope y'all can hear me. I am driving my sister back from school today on this beautiful Thursday afternoon here. We have had unbelievable weather here in Raleigh. For those of you who are in North Carolina, a lot of people that watch my videos I have personal contact with. So y'all would know how great the weather has been so far this week. It's just been great weather. Great temperatures, relatively low humidity, not terribly intense sun. And then at night, that sun goes behind the trees, and man, it can cool down very quickly if you're not careful. But I really want to come on here. I want to say I'm sorry for not recording a podcast episode. I've had X, Y, Z, A, B, and C of things to do for school at Chapel Hill this week. I mean, there's just been a lot of stuff going on. That's not necessarily in like the biggest or hardest classes that I have, as in the classes that are worth the most points, but rather just the culmination of classes or of work and almost busy work for that matter, reading and trying to grasp concepts before the midterm and stuff like that for certain classes that just take a while. And I've had quite a bit of that to do. And so that is the main factor that's contributed to me not being able to post a podcast episode this week. But I really just want to come on here and just give a brief update of where we are. After this weekend of college football, I will plan to post a new podcast episode on Sunday, like I normally do. And I will try to make sure I get that done for y'all. So I just want to give you an update there. The second thing I want to do while I have a brief moment here, drive my sister back. Got about 15 more minutes before we get back home. I wanted to talk about the Clemson-Virginia game. You can go ahead and unzip that, Jennifer. They know you're in here. I wanted to talk about the Clemson-Virginia game. A couple of YouTubers I watch, obviously on YouTube, they like Pigskin Pete, Uncle Lou being the main ones there. They're had a couple of predictions and previews on the Clemson Virginia game, and they were talking about this game being a potentially close game. And I just want to come out there and say this: I don't necessarily see that. The line, for those of you who don't know, the line in Vegas, which is usually a pretty credible source. I mean, those guys out there are absolutely incredible with lines and money and gambling. Obviously, it's like the gambling hub of the world practically. The line is Clemson by 28, I want to say. I think it was initially 28 and a half, and it went down to 28, which is understandable when it's right above that flat number. Sometimes it goes down to that flat number, and sometimes it goes. You may see it trend just below that 4 touchdowns, because obviously more people like to bet it at 27 rather than 28, just because the nature of football with 7 points, scoring everything like that. But that's beside the point. Mainly Pigskin Pete. I just finished up watching his video. The guy, I mean, I don't know him, but I give a lot of credibility to his information and what he says. I think he knows what he's talking about for the majority. But he made an interesting point about how he does not see this game going the same way that the 2019 ACC championship game went, mainly because Virginia has now seen Clemson one time. Bronco Mendenhall has been at Virginia for about 5 years now. And up until this point, he had never played against Clemson. Up until the point of the ACC championship game, he never played Clemson. And that line was relatively similar, I believe, in the ACC championship game. And Clemson won 62-17, and ultimately just was in control of that game from basically after the first possession. Now, Virginia in that game didn't move the ball in the first possession, but after that, there wasn't a whole lot of ball movement, and Clemson was in thorough control of that and everything like that. And Virginia last year, and I'll start going into why I actually think this game could be very reminiscent of the ACC championship game, is Virginia last year was basically like the Kentucky of the year before, or the Minnesota of that year as well. We're talking about a team that just the program of Virginia is not built to reload. When they lose that many good players from one year, they're not necessarily a program that's going to be ready to go the next year, like a Clemson or an Alabama or a Georgia even. And that's not at fault of Virginia. It's just there are certain restrictions that Virginia has on itself. Obviously, the academic prestige of the university doesn't help in that. But Virginia had one of the best quarterbacks they had in years last year, They beat Virginia Tech for the first time since Jack and Jill went up the hill and came back down. I mean, the cows practically came home by the time Virginia beat Virginia Tech last year. It was the first time in forever. And they went to the Orange Bowl and gave Florida everything they wanted. It was a great year for Virginia last year, but we're talking about a program, though, that can't – I don't know if they can sustain that much success for a given period of time. I think it could be highly problematic for that program, and I just don't see them being able to keep this game necessarily close with Clemson. And I don't make these predictions very often. Now, I will say, the one prediction I did make this year was the Louisville-Miami game, and I was horribly off on that. I thought Louisville was going to beat Miami at home. I did not buy into the Miami hype. I just didn't see it, but I was wrong, and I will be the first one to admit that I was terribly wrong on that. I was very, very wrong. That doesn't change my thoughts about Miami. And trust me, when Clemson plays Miami next week, we'll make sure to discuss that game ad nauseum. I'll make sure to include that in the podcast here because that's going to be a fun one. I have similar disdain to Miami as I do towards Florida State. Now, I don't have anything personal against Miami, but the program aura of Miami reminds me a lot of Florida State, and there's just there's a lot of things I can say about that, and I don't necessarily want to because I don't want to spoil what I'm going to go into here later in this upcoming week. But trust me, we will have plenty of time to talk about that. But back to the Virginia. I don't see Virginia necessarily sustaining the same success year to year, and I actually think Clemson is significantly better at the first part of the year this year in the 2020 season than they were at the beginning of the 2019 season. If you remember, Clemson came out of the barracks in 2019 kind of not super, but relatively sluggish. Trevor Lawrence did not look amazing. Threw quite a few interceptions at the beginning of the year. Clemson did blow out some teams, but obviously had that 1-point scare against North Carolina. And it just didn't look stunning coming out of the gates. But Clemson this year, especially in the times the starters have played, and that may be the biggest difference. Last year, Clemson could blow out teams, but the starters didn't look phenomenal. This year, I think the starters look incredible. Now, the second string, that's a different story. The second string definitely needs some work. However, there's a couple things to go into that. You got to think about it. The second string mainly gets practice or mainly develops in practice. And obviously having the COVID restrictions, the strange off season, limited practice hours, more protocols, got to take everyone's temperature. So you get sick, you got to sit out. I think that is hindering the development of the second string. But you look at it, and Clemson starters have come absolute guns blazing out this year, and I really think that plays in Clemson's advantage. Games at home, it's going to be 8 o'clock. Now, I get that home field advantage sort of are negated this year just because of the crowd capacities, and there's a quota on that, which makes it harder to find tickets, and you can't be as loud. But, I mean, it's still relatively loud. If you listen to the Clemson Citadel game, you could hear a crowd presence. It's definitely not silent. It's not nearly as loud as it normally would be, but it's definitely not silent for that matter. So, me personally, I see this game going very similar to the Clemson-Virginia game of last year, if not even worse, because I think Clemson's actually a little bit of a better team than they were at the time they played Virginia last year. And I think Virginia has taken – now, I know they beat Duke. I know they beat Duke by 18. And that was a solid win. That's a handling win there. Duke is not very good at all. They're actually quite bad. But you think about it logically, I can't see Virginia over one game getting significantly better after all the stuff they lost. And I'll be the first to admit I could be completely wrong on this, and I realize that I am significantly undervaluing Virginia. But I just don't see the progress made from year 5 to year 6 or so with Bronco Mendenhall. That does not mean that Bronco Mendenhall is a bad coach. This has no reflection upon Bronco Mendenhall or the Virginia program. Virginia's got a very good program, or a very solid program right now, and they're on the up and coming. Virginia is a better program today than they were 10 years ago, and there's no disputing that. I mean, Virginia used to be a program like Duke was back in the day, where maybe 2 wins, maybe 3 at the most. And they are certainly in a much better trajectory than they were. They've definitely hit the critical point where the slope went to 0 and has now changed in that. But just for this game, I just don't see Virginia keeping up. I think too many things work against them. And I really do see Clemson blowing this game out. And I don't make these predictions very often. And as I mentioned earlier, the Louisville game was that was definitely a swing and a miss. But the last time I did this for one of the Clemson games, where I actually made a prediction, I was like, I actually think Clemson's going to come out here and dominate, was in 2015 when Clemson went on the road to play Miami and won 58-0. So there might be something there. And I don't try to do these often because I don't want to come off cocky or anything like that. But I really, just if you look at it from a logical standpoint, I just don't see how Virginia keeps this game close. Maybe they do, and I may be wrong, but as far as I see it, I don't. I just don't. I can't see it being terribly close, at least this weekend. But hey, if it is close and if Virginia wins, I will definitely come in here and I will make a post-game reaction and analyze why I was wrong, where I went wrong, and how to improve on it. Because obviously, I want to provide accurate projections and predictions for y'all. But we will see how the game goes. But as of right now, I don't see Virginia keeping it close. But we will have to see what happens on Saturday night. So with that being said, y'all have a good day, good rest of y'all's day. I hope y'all are enjoying the weather, especially if you're out here in North Carolina. And I will see y'all on Sunday, perhaps Monday, just depending on when I can post that. And we'll be ready to talk about this past week of college football.